earthquake does strike.
Bob Bazell, if you'll stand by for just a minute here, we've just made contact with Colonel Bruce Harvey of the Salvation Army in San Francisco, and obviously, Colonel Harvey, you're going to have your hands full.
We already do. We sure do.
Tell us what you're doing.
We are trying to respond immediately to critical areas. We have canteens and volunteers on duty at the site of the Marina fire. That's the big fire that's down along the waterfront area. In Oakland, where the section of the freeway collapsed and there's a very large loss of life, we have a number of people and canteens on duty over there. We're currently bringing in canteens and people from a variety of areas in Northern California, Sacramento, Santa Rosa, and so forth.
Are they able to get in all right?
We can get, the good thing is the Sacramento people and that side can work on the Oakland side, and we can get in. 101 North, coming in from the north across the Golden Gate Bridge is open, so we can get in that way.
You know, that's one of the remarkable things. The Golden Gate Bridge has been open continuously.
That's right.
And it's one of the older bridges in the area, isn't it?
It is, and I'm not sure why. It's possibly just the way this thing hit the community. We have feeding programs going on here in the city. All kinds of things. I can't even repeat them all. But the school system has their people out inspecting schools, and we have them coming to one of our locations to get coffee and sandwiches in that process. We have 2 senior apartment houses that we operate here in downtown San Francisco. We had to bring all of those people out of the apartments, and we still have no power in this area. We brought those people out. We had food delivered and took care of that. Now we've taken each of those people back into their apartment and helped them sweep up what could be done in the dark and put them to bed. We still are having some difficulty in communicating with Santa Cruz. The power plant at Moss Landing is out of commission, and so there's no power. I got a message finally from our officers in Santa Cruz to say that there's a considerable amount of destruction and damage, and they have a canteen and they're trying to respond as best they can in that area. We have a camp that is, about 10 miles from Santa Cruz, and we have heard reports from there. Our people have called in, and they've got some very serious damage to our buildings and at the camp. Fortunately, none of our people have been injured, but we have a command center set up here at our divisional headquarters, and we are routing the canteens. We've just been notified that some of our people from as far away as Portland, Oregon, and Los Angeles are on standby, ready to respond if we need them and can use them.
Well, Colonel Harvey, your organization is a remarkable organization, and it's truly remarkable how so many people in a disaster like this do come together to try to help others. I think these disasters do tend to bring out the best in people, don't they?
I think so. I think you'll hear, obviously you'll hear some of the worst in people, but at times like this, we find that people respond very generously, very warmly, and very quickly. And we've got 25 people in this building right now. We can't answer the phone as fast as it's ringing, with people offering to come to do whatever they can. We think if we can get through the night here, when it's light and we get a better assessment of what's happening and what people need to do, we're going to try and respond appropriately.
Well, Colonel Harvey, I won't keep you any longer from your duties. I know you want to get back out there and tend to the people who need you on the streets of San Francisco and the other damaged communities around the area from that quake that struck at 5:04 today, Pacific time. It was 7.0 on the Richter scale, a major quake. And if you're just joining us, let me welcome you to NBC coverage of this earthquake, this disaster. We are continuing our coverage straight through the night, and helping us considerably in this is our station in San Francisco, KRON, the NBC affiliate there. They've been covering this story very thoroughly, and we're going to join them now and continue their coverage.
Power plant, I did not want to leave that hanging. It is basically what they do when there is what they call an unusual event. Well, that unusual event, certainly the earthquake, and we can tell you they're checking of so far no late word, but at the last word we had, there's no apparent damage to the Diablo Canyon power plant. We'll be right back.
Well, this is NBC News again. We happened to catch KRON in San Francisco just as they were breaking for tape. We have some tape right now, some highlights of the disaster as it struck today in San Francisco. We're going to show you some of the pictures. Some of these we may not have seen before, some we may. This is the Oakland Bay Bridge, and you can see it right in the center there. Here's a closer shot, how the top level of the bridge collapsed and actually damaged the bottom level, pushed it down. But as we discussed earlier, there are estimates the Army Corps of Engineers will be able to get this back up and running, at least a few lanes of it, in the next few days. This is the fire area where the gas main broke. At least one of the gas mains did. There was a spark that set off a fire, and this is a consequence of an earthquake. Almost always in earthquakes, there are fires that result from them because of the release of gas, and then inevitably there is some spark when the gas reaches a volatile mixture with the air. People here, I don't know if this tape is going to continue to show this, but they were propping up the side of that sagging building to rush in and try to rescue people inside, which is quite heroic. A tragic scene here. Someone pinned in the rubble of the Freeway overpass on the Oakland side of the Bay Bridge, where there was quite a large loss of life, apparently, possibly the worst. And these are early night scenes, again, of the fire area. Fortunately, it seems as though the San Francisco Fire Department is going to be able to contain this fire. The department had quite a bit of trouble with water. Water mains also tend to rupture in earthquakes because they run through various types of soil, some of it loose, some of it drilled through rock, and when you get these vibrations and shifts in earth going, the water main can shear as well as the gas main, and then you have this double cascading problem of a fire starting because of gas, igniting the wood frame structures you see. They're tossed about in the loose soil that liquefies when the earthquake shakes it, becomes sort of like jello. Buildings tend to collapse. And then you have difficulty with water. Much of the water you're seeing here was actually pumped out of the bay, was rigged to pump out of the bay. We have Bob Bazell also standing by, who's been helping us with some of the scientific aspects of earthquakes and some personal observations too, because Bob is from San Francisco and has lived with the earthquake menace all his life. It is something that San Franciscans grow up with and talk about quite a bit, don't they, Bob? I mean, there's always a little chatter at cocktail parties and whatnot about the big one that's going to come, or when's the quake going to hit?
Oh, yeah, it's a constant joke. And in fact, one of the KRON, which has been providing us with this magnificent coverage all evening, has been running a promotion for the last few months, which is a very good piece of promotion for their news, and it shows the diversity of people who live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the end of it says, how can all these people want to live on a fault line and not want to leave, and as if to say what a wonderful place San Francisco is, and indeed it is. But I think it's always in the back of people's minds when you've been through an earthquake, and I've been through a few, never one as strong as this, but it's an experience you don't ever forget. And this will change a lot of people's perceptions, I think, about San Francisco and California for a long time, and perhaps generates some more fear than there had been, because there hasn't been an earthquake that's caused much of a loss of life since the 1968 or 72, you correct me, on that San Fernando earthquake in Southern California, which was about the same magnitude on the Richter scale. The other thing that's interesting was it was freeway overpasses that collapsed that caused most of the loss of life. There was also a hospital that collapsed in that one. In this one, miraculously, there seems to be very, very few building collapses. There was one in San Francisco, but it was mostly that freeway that caused the problem. The building codes, as we were talking about before when we went back to KRON, the building codes have been very good. Among the things they did, for instance, in the last few years was that they took all the ornamental structures off tall buildings that were made of anything like concrete that could fall on the ground and hurt somebody. But even if you looked at some of those pictures, even still, a lot of glass came down and cut people up pretty badly. Chuck?
All right. We were talking about the San Fernando quake was in 1971, and there were a number of deaths. It measured 6.6 on the Richter scale. And part of when you design for earthquakes, as you mentioned, Bob, it's not just the external protuberances and things that are attached to buildings that can fall down. Also inside, there's quite a science to earthquake design and making certain that ceilings are attached properly and pieces of furniture are are well anchored that are heavy. Even wall units sometimes can come loose and cause quite a bit of damage. Ceilings can fall and cause quite a bit of damage inside the people who are in essentially earthquake-safe buildings. So you can't stop with the structure. You've got to build also so that the things inside the building can't do damage and that the superficial, the facade, can't fall down. KRON continues its coverage in San Francisco. We're going to check in with them and listen in.
Not having enough water to fight the fires. We have Wilson Van All standing by live. Let's go to him, see how things are going. Wilson?
Well, Suzanne, we told you about the water problems in fighting those fires earlier tonight. What is going on, and it has continued for the past couple of hours, is that the San Francisco fireboat Phoenix has been drafting water out of the bay. It is taking bay water because the water mains that would otherwise feed the firefighting attempt against the fire at the corner of Beach and Divisadero were simply not working. The mains were broken. As that boat drafts water out of the bay, it ships it to the pumper that we see over here, and from there it goes to the fire. We can show you pictures of what that fire was like just about 4:30, 4:45 this afternoon. It was an intense blaze that started in a single apartment building at the corner of Divisadero and Beach, and then it spread to houses both to the north and the west of the original fire. There was simply not enough water to put on those houses to try to save them until again the fireboat Phoenix and the pumpers got here and were able to make up for that broken line. As you can see the intensity of this fire now, it started leaping rooftops.
Secure your residence. Shut off the electricity. Shut off the gas.
And it was so dangerous in the area because of some broken gas lines that people were being evacuated for blocks around. They were not able even to stand around and watch their own homes burn. They were being shooed away from that scene for their own future protection. The firefighters kept their efforts on the blaze, but there was not enough water, as we said before, not enough water to keep it from spreading to those homes, both to the north and the west of the building that was originally involved. Ambulances came to the scene because right next to the fire, there was another building at the northeast corner of the intersection of Divisadero and Beach, another building that had collapsed, a three-story apartment building that they kept bringing people out of. And yet we go back to scenes of this fire and see the intensity of that. They had rescues from that other building. Let's see if we can see the one that was indeed collapsed. No, these are the fires, the flames leaping the roofs and involving those houses to the north and so forth. Our understanding, and this is again an unconfirmed report, is that there were people who did not make it out of that burning building. Our understanding is that there were people who perished in that fire, but before we get any real confirmation of that, it will take the arson investigators, the fire department investigators going in there and finding out what exactly is in there when daylight comes. Suzanne, we'll go back to you.
Wilson, I know this is difficult to estimate with what's going on down there, but a rough estimate of how many separate buildings were involved down in the Marina district.
The best we can tell in terms of the fire was that there was one building where it started on that corner of Beach and Divisadero, and we think two houses to the north of that and also two houses to the west of the original building were involved in the flames and destroyed. There would be water damage and perhaps smoke damage to other buildings, and there are still some other buildings where there were collapses. The one across the street that we talked to you about, and another building, we believe, on Cervantes Street that also collapsed. Our understanding is that there were not people inside that second building. However, there were people pulled out, fortunately alive, from the one that collapsed across the street from the fire. That's our best news tonight. And again, the bad news is that apparently there were fatalities in the fire itself.
We have heard word that there were 8 fatalities, and that is a confirmed word that we have from the Beach and Divisadero fires, so I'm assuming they mean all of them. When you talk of structures collapsing, Wilson, I'm curious as to whether they collapsed because of the earthquake or because of a gas explosion within the homes. Is any way we can know that at this time?
Our understanding is that it was entirely the earthquake. There seemed to be no fire involvement in the buildings that collapsed. And one of those, a big 3-story apartment building that after the collapse had come down to less than 1 story in all. There were some explosions associated with gas leaks, but those appeared to be from the scene of the fire itself. We were here very shortly after the fire broke out, and we saw no evidence of any kind of gas explosions anywhere else, although a lot of this could change. Obviously, people will be going inside those buildings after daybreak and trying to get the best information they can. But it appears that the buildings that went down, that collapsed in rubble, did so because of the intensity of this earthquake.
Because of the uncertainty of the situation in the marina when this fire started and the firemen's inability, of course, to control this fire, they really didn't know how it was going to be stopped. A lot of people, of course, got out, and many of the people who can't go back to their homes or apartments in the Marina area have now been sent to emergency centers in San Francisco. They include the Marina Middle School, St. Ignatius High School, and Moscone Center. With us tonight is Claudia Gomez. She is a desk assistant here at Channel 4 that found herself in a very unlikely situation today. Where was it?
On the Bay Bridge, probably about a half-mile past Treasure Island toward the East Bay.
Were you heading for the city or leaving?
I was leaving the city, heading toward Oakland.
What'd you see? What did you feel?
The bus started shaking really violently, back and forth, side to side, and we picked up movement right after that. I think everybody thought everything was fine, and then all of a sudden we saw a great deal of people running toward us away from where the bridge collapsed, screaming, "The bridge is collapsing," and I think we all thought that it was going to be sort of a domino effect, that one section would fall and then another and then another.
Earlier you had said that the bus stopped and then you felt the movement. Did you feel any movement at all as the bus was rolling down the bridge?
You know, I sensed that the bus driver...
There is a bus there, I should say, Claudia. That was not your bus.
That's
you were not that close to it.
No.
All right.
I was probably about, I would guess, about a quarter of a mile toward the San Francisco
But again,
side
you
of
were
that.
on the lower deck,
On the lower
going
deck.
toward the East Bay.
Right.
What'd you do then?
I think everybody thought that it was fine, and they started rolling again until all the wave of people from that section that collapsed started running back toward our bus and screaming, "The bridge is collapsing." There was real panic.
How did people behave, though? I mean, did they leave their cars? Did they stay in their cars? Did they attempt to turn around?
No, absolutely. They just left their cars, keys in the cars, doors wide open. They were thoroughly panicked, running back. I think they had the same idea that I did, get to land. So people abandoned their cars.
How long did it take you before your bus started moving again and managed to turn around back to the city?
I didn't wait around that long. I ran back to Treasure Island. I ran probably about a half mile back to Treasure Island. And probably a half hour after that, they started turning the vehicles that were actually on the Treasure Island part of the span. They started turning them around and heading them back to San Francisco.
All right. We heard an earlier report, and we don't know if this is confirmed, but it was, again, a report that a woman on the upper deck of the Bay Bridge, in other words, a woman going from Oakland to San Francisco, saw the bridge go down right in front of her, and she, for some reason, decided that she would speed up and try to make the jump. Well, she didn't make the jump, and her car was the one that ended up falling into the bay. So we do have, we had earlier reports of the Coast Guard search and rescue. We understand that there was one fatality there, the woman going overboard. So that is something that presumably will come up again as soon as we get a little bit more clarification on that story, but it is one that is circulating tonight. Bob?
Don Sharp is our head engineer here at Channel 4. He's also a part of this historic day as well. Don, where were you?
I was going to check for parade coverage for the A's over to Oakland, so I was actually on the bridge. And I was in a four-wheel drive Bronco, which is a very heavy automobile. And my first experience was being tossed up in the air, and I said, Jesus Christ, I've blown 4 tires simultaneously. But then when the car came back down and shifted over 2 lanes, and kept going for 45 seconds, wait a minute, this is not me.
You know, one of the interesting situations is that we know how volatile the bridge could be, and yet nobody really knows the proper procedure or has been told the proper procedure of what to do in the event that this happened. What were your instincts?
My instinct was to correct for what I just felt, and when it happened again, moving over 2 lanes, I realized that it wasn't me, and the sound sounded like a freight train was continually hitting the bridge. And when I saw other cars beginning hitting the side of the bridge, I realized that, hey, something is going on here. Then all of a sudden, there was a cave-in the bridgeway, actually by 6 to 12 inches. And I was in a four-wheel drive, and it was like driving in the mountains. I finally got off of the Bay Bridge and kind of sat on the side, called the assignment desk, and at that point, it dawned on me that it was just 6 to 12 inches of just the pavement had just sunk into the ground, and there was water gushing out from the aftermath of that.
This appears to be about a 25, 30-foot span of the upper deck which collapsed, and we have varying reports on whether the bridge is structurally sound at this point, whether the pavement can be repaired. And the latest word we have is that Caltrans is going to have to look at it very, very carefully tomorrow, but all day tomorrow it'll definitely be shut down. There's nowhere to do an easy repair on this kind of damage.
Well, we're already getting some conflicting reports as to when this bridge is going to get back to normal. From the looks of it, of course, I'm no expert on the bridge, but you can see that the bottom pavement has been removed, and it would seem that the option at this point would be for engineers to remove this piece of debris and probably move cars back and forth in both directions on the lower span. We'll see if that happens.
I don't know if we have said this, but the two cars there were the only ones involved directly in that collapse of the upper deck, and as we understand it, there were no fatalities in those two cars. The men and women in them survived. In fact, they walked out of the cars. So as amazing as that seems, it may just be the one fatality from the bridge collapse, and that would be the woman who stepped on the gas and decided to go 50, 60 miles an hour and try to jump the span, which did not work, and she landed in the water.
We just received a report that at 11:39 Pacific Standard Time, we felt another aftershock, and our word is that it measured 4.1 on the Richter scale. We get no specific location on this, but we will remind you that seismic experts have been telling us all night that this may not be the end of it. In fact, they are issuing warnings almost hourly, saying that you know, there's going to be more aftershocks. Expect them and be ready for them.
And that's why they suggest that you stay where you are. If you're in your home, if you're in anywhere that's safe, just stay where you are, because it's going to take some time. And as power comes back on, it's not going to be restored all at once, but PG&E is going to do it in a regimented fashion so that they don't overblow their own system. But it'll be starting tomorrow morning.
We've just gotten word that Vice President Quayle has landed at Moffett Field, and we'll have more on his itinerary as we go. But we're going to Anthony Moore right now. He has been covering the calamity at the Cypress collapse. Anthony?
Well, Bob and Suzanne, the chaos of the initial moments after the earthquake has turned into some more organized chaos here. We're at the command center that Oakland police have set up for the Cypress section of the freeway disaster. Behind me, you can see the freeway. This section did not actually pancake, but the far side of the freeway, clearly the pylons on the upper tier have broken free, and it is now perched precariously over. Said some rescuers, it's simply the rebar on this side which is holding this section of the upper part of the freeway from actually collapsing again. And they're worried about those aftershocks, but they're also worried about all the people who were on that freeway at the time of the earthquake. Now, most of the initial victims, the people who were on this section at least, were able to get out. On the other sections that we were at earlier, we have some tape of that. Most of those cars were so badly crushed that most of the people were not saved. But what you're looking at now is a rescuer about to take down one victim who survived with minor injuries, a young man. There you can see his still booted feet coming down on a forklift. It was a combination of rescuers from the fire department and individual citizens. In fact, the man you're looking at standing or kneeling over the victim stayed with the victim while he was trapped in his car. He said for 2 hours. The man was moaning, screaming, trying to have somebody free him. And it took the jaws of life, those hydraulic jaws, to open up the car, which was crushed almost like a sardine can, and get him out. Fortunately, in that section, there weren't that many other cars. I'm told that there were some cars in the area which were so totally obliterated that there couldn't be anybody alive, but it was not bumper-to-bumper traffic at this time. What you're looking at now is raw video which we shot just moments after the rescuers were able to bring this victim down. This is now must have been about 9 or 9:30. You lose track of time at this time. That's a close-up shot of the rescuers attending to the victim. A young man, I am told. Rescuers did know who he was. We only know that his name, I believe, was Tim. They did not want to release his full name until his family had been notified. But he apparently was suffering only from a loss of blood, from shock, of course, and some leg injuries. And he was one of the only people that we have heard of actually being brought out. That does not mean that rescuers are not trying, however, to look for more victims. They have apparently brought in a number of dogs, and they just held a conference here, we understand, to determine what they're going to do next. With these dogs, we are told they're planning on going in the areas that people are not able to get into, where the top section has crushed down.
Sir,
We're live on the air right now.
I do not care, sir.
I guess we're being pulled off.
You are?
Can you tell me why?
No, you know there's a disaster.
I guess we're being pulled off the air right now. We're going to have to throw it back to you, Bob and Suzanne.
Okay, Anthony, it's part of the liability to be in a dangerous area like that. But, of course, Anthony is trying to get as much information as he can, and we'll be checking back with him momentarily.
Well, and it could be that they need to get more PG&E special light trucks in there so that they can see what they're doing. In that case, of course, we understand why that has to happen. We have Mark Thompson joining us in the studio right now. Mark?
Suzanne, Bob, just was looking at some interesting information on, first, the aftershocks that have followed the initial 7.0 quake a little after 5 o'clock. Now, soon after that 5:04 quake, 5:25, a 4.8 aftershock, then one of 5.2 at 5:41. And in your head, as you go through in your own mind and think, yeah, you know, I remember these, see if it doesn't really correspond with your own experience. At 8:26 tonight, we had a 4.0 register, again an aftershock, and an aftershock of that initial quake of 4.1 just a few minutes ago at 11:39. Interestingly enough as well, you know, this we thought was the third biggest quake ever recorded in California history. That's not really the case. We went back and checked. Don Sango in our research department actually dug up the following. Now, some of these are pre-Richter scale, by the way. The Santa Barbara Channel in 1812 recorded a quake of 7.1. In Los Angeles in February of 1957, a quake of 7.9. So that was almost as big as the 06 quake. In Owens Valley in 1872, 7.0. San Francisco, of course, in 06, 8.3. Imperial Valley, 7.1. Kern County, of course, 7.7. And today, 7.0. The aftershocks, interestingly enough, of course, will follow for hours, days, weeks, even years, they say, after the initial quake. And they can, as we mentioned about a half hour ago, sometimes be greater than the initial quake, but generally not. And finally, let me throw something a little bizarre at you, and it's the following. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had issued a warning to coastal areas today, and this is something we spoke about the last couple of nights on the news, for a high tide of 6.8 feet. This is the highest tide in several years. Now, there is one theory, and this is the crazy spin on this. There's one theory of earthquakes that says that the alignment of the sun and the moon creates such high tides that the gravitational pull also might help trigger an earthquake. I should hasten to add, this is really speculative, but you know, as long as we're throwing in all these tidbits, the high tide hit at 1:27 this afternoon, as you know, the quake a little bit after 5 o'clock. And again, to reiterate, earthquake weather. There's no such thing as earthquake weather. It's an old, Aristotle believed that earthquakes were caused by winds that were trapped underground. And as they tried to escape, these winds through these caverns created earthquakes. That lore was sort of perpetuated through the ages, and that's the reason we talk about earthquake weather. But there's no truth to the fact that on a still day, you're more likely to find an earthquake.
But the aftershocks, though, are a real concern. I might remind you of the Mexico City quake in the early 80s. The original quake was 8.1, and the Juarez Hospital, which took in a number of the injured, didn't fall in the first quake. It fell in the aftershock, which was a 7.4. And that's when 400 people were killed in that hospital alone. So what happens is the initial quake will do the major damage to the building, and it might fall on an aftershock. And that's why if you're in a building that appears to be the least bit unstable, you do your best to get out of it until it has been checked and find another safer place to be.
There perhaps is no way to predict earthquakes, but we've always heard that animals perhaps have this other sense
sixth sense that birds leave trees just prior to an earthquake.
Well,
and you know, it should also be added, Bob and Suzanne, if we can. We talk about Mexico City, and the images of Mexico City are so vivid, the destruction so horrific. But the fact is that, generally speaking, many areas of the Bay Area are not in the category of Mexico City. The structures here in this area are better than those in Mexico City. So don't panic. These aftershocks that we will, of course, experience and have been experiencing are not as likely to cause the kind of damage that we saw in Mexico City.
A good cautionary word. Thank you.
Mark Jones, correspondent Mark Jones, was in the Embarcadero area throughout most of late this evening and tonight. He is here now to give us some information on ferry service.
Well, people certainly were not aware of it until about 2 hours ago because it was mentioned on the radio stations. But all of the ferry services in the Bay Area, the Red and White Fleet, the Golden Gate Transit, all of them have gotten in together and have chipped in and have been picking up passengers in the Embarcadero. I think we have some videotape. 4,000 passengers tonight that have been taking the ferry from the Embarcadero and crossing the bay, 45 minutes to Oakland and landing in Oakland at the ferry building over there. And I am told that all of the services, this is free service by the way, they're not charging of course, all of the services will start again tomorrow morning at 5:30. They plan on having at least 10 ferry boats make the run from Oakland to San Francisco, and they think that they will have a run about every 15 minutes, and the boats were packed. As we were getting ready to leave tonight, they said this is the last ferry run, and even as we were leaving, more people were showing up and trying to make it across the bay to get home to their families.
Mark, earlier we heard that the Embarcadero area was one of those areas where looting was taking place. What do you know about that?
Not far from the Embarcadero. We did stop. Police were checking out one location where an alarm had gone off and there was a broken window, but we've cruised the Marina today. We cruised to Chinatown tonight, and so far there's been very little evidence of that. I'll tell you, the eeriest thing I've seen tonight is you forget how dependent we become on electricity, and it is very strange to be out there and see hundreds and hundreds of buses just parked dead in the street.
Not to mention all the empty or seemingly empty buildings along Market Street and along Van Ness and along some of the major routes. Suzanne and I just returned from a 3-mile trip from Sutro Tower, and well, some of you may remember the blackouts from World War II. It looked very much like that. Buildings completely dark.
And hundreds of people sitting out on the curb.
Yeah. Right, and some people in the street directing traffic.
Volunteers taking their flashlights directing traffic, so it's really quite orderly out there, in spite of what may seem like a panic or a would-be panic situation.
Down at Van Ness and Market Street tonight, homeless people are directing traffic. There's still a great deal of traffic in downtown San Francisco, and the homeless are out waving people through and stopping it appropriately.
All right, Supervisor Richard Hongisto with us in just a moment, but first let me tell you a little bit about the school closings, the latest we've got, and here they are. You can read them off the screen as I mention them, in case your picture's bad. San Francisco District, of course, will be closed. San Jose, Oakland, Palo Alto, the Jefferson District in Daly City, the school district in Berkeley, the San Mateo Union High School District, the Santa Clara City School District will be closed. San Francisco State College will be closed. St. Mary's in Moraga will be closed. Stanford University will be closed. Santa Clara University at this moment will be closed. The Eastside Union High School in San Jose, all Catholic elementary schools in the Diocese of San Jose, and Lawrence Academy. And there's the latest list if you are affected in any of those areas. Suzanne?
Something else everybody has on their minds right now. If they don't have power, they wonder when it is going to be.
You have been watching, in case you joined us in the last few minutes, that's KRON in San Francisco, the NBC affiliate. I'm Chuck Scarborough, NBC News in New York. And we continue our coverage of the earthquake that struck San Francisco yesterday now at 4 minutes past 5 p.m. Pacific time. In case you've tuned in lately, I will tell you that the death toll that has resulted from that quake, from the widespread damage of the quake, is estimated to be somewhere between 200 and 300 at the moment, but the figures fluctuate and they certainly aren't reliable at this stage of the coverage of the earthquake and the rescue effort. More reliable, solid figures, of course, will emerge over the following hours, and NBC News is going to continue covering this story straight through the night, and we'll pick it up again with NBC News at sunrise, beginning a bit before sunrise at 4 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll also share the facilities with KRON in San Francisco and bring the rest of you around the country the KRON coverage, which has been superb throughout the evening of the disaster that struck their city. It was an earthquake that hit 7 on the Richter scale. This is a major quake. It caused considerable damage throughout the area, damage radiating as far as 250 miles from the epicenter in Santa Cruz. And the worst of the damage, as far as we've been able to ascertain, has been on the Oakland side of the Bay Bridge, the San Francisco Bay Bridge there, the Oakland Bay Bridge, where a huge piece of roadway, perhaps 1.5 miles long, in an elevated roadway, collapsed and fell down on top of the lower roadway, and people down below, this is the bridge here, and you can see a portion of the bridge itself that collapsed, which you've probably seen if you've been with us earlier from time to time, and there were a couple of casualties on the bridge itself and considerable damage in that area alone to the Oakland Bay Bridge. But on the eastern approach to the bridge, Interstate 880, there was a major collapse, and perhaps we'll see that in just a second if you haven't seen it before, where the concrete pillars simply splayed out like somebody doing the splits. And the top part of the roadway, fell down on the bottom part of the highlighted area there, crushing everybody underneath at the worst possible time during the rush hour at shortly after 5 o'clock local time when there was plenty of traffic. Many of the casualties from that area where it was most severely hit by the earthquake were taken to Letterman Hospital in Oakland, and Captain Michael French, the public affairs officer at Letterman Hospital, is on the telephone with us right now. Captain, can you tell us the situation, how many casualties you've taken in?
Yes, sir. We're located in San Francisco, sir. We received 25 casualties thus far. Of those 25 casualties, 16 have been released. One individual died en route to this facility, and we currently have 8 people admitted and hospitalized.
So you're on the San Francisco side of the bridge, and it would be difficult, I guess, to get casualties from the other side, the Oakland side, where the main damage is, over to you, would it not?
Well, yes, sir. However, we received some of our casualties from the Bay Bridge area. We're not sure where they came from. They were transported by U.S. Coast Guard helicopters from Alameda on the Oakland side.
Have you been in touch with any other hospitals in the area trying to coordinate medical attention?
No, sir, we have not. We are just receiving casualties as the emergency procedures warrant in the city of San Francisco. We're just taking casualties as they send them to us.
Well, it sounds like your casualty count, at least on your side of the bridge, is fairly low. So the city of San Francisco itself, proper, may have gotten away with minimal casualties.
Yes, sir.
Where were you when the quake struck?
Well, sir, I was up in my home at the time and felt it kind of move from side to side just a smidge.
So you didn't feel much at all where you were?
Yes, sir, I felt quite a bit.
Oh, you did? Not,
yes,
more than just a smidge then, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
what sort of structure was your home?
It's an apartment, sir.
So
it's just a multi-story apartment.
Uh-huh. Is it, how many stories?
3 stories.
3 stories high. Did it sustain any damage?
No, sir.
Is it basically a wooden structure? Is it brick
I'm
face?
not really sure, sir, how it's built.
All right. We're going to move on. Thank you very much,
You're
Captain
quite
Friend,
welcome,
for the update in Letterman Hospital in San Francisco. Now, in Santa Cruz, we have Sister Julie Heyer at Dominican Santa Cruz Hospital, and Santa Cruz was very near the epicenter. I think it was about 7 miles away from Santa Cruz, California, and we haven't heard a lot out of Santa Cruz, so perhaps we can get an update on the situation from Sister Heyer.
Yes, we have treated approximately 80 patients here at Dominican. We have admitted 14 of those patients. They're coming in with various injuries as a result of flying debris. Also, we have had a number of heart attacks and other cardiac conditions that have been admitted, as well as patients just experiencing fright from the actual trauma. At this point, it is midnight here in Santa Cruz, and it appears that the high volume of people have ended, and that, in fact, now that it has slowed down as far as the patient's admissions. There are continuing to be those that arrive in the emergency room, and we're treating them as they arrive.
Sister Heyer, can you tell us again about how many people you've treated in your hospital since the quake struck?
Yes, we have treated approximately 80 people.
80 people. Do you know, have you had a chance to kind of assess the damage in your area?
At this point in time, the only damage that we've been able to assess is that it's happened at the hospital itself, and that damage has been minimal. We understand from conversations that have occurred with other people in the area that there has been substantial damage in downtown Santa Cruz, as well as some of the houses in the area.
Have you got power?
Pardon me?
Have you got electrical
we are
power?
on auxiliary power.
Your own generators?
Yes, we are.
Any word on when power is going to be restored in your area?
No, we don't have any word on that, but we understand the crews are working.
And how long can you run on generated power to keep the hospital functioning?
As long as we need to.
Okay, well, we're glad to hear that. Sister Heyer, thank you very much for the information. One other tidbit which shows you exactly how far-reaching something like this can be, a disaster of this magnitude that struck California, that there is some question now about the launch of the space shuttle Atlantis, because apparently there is a lab in California, an Air Force Control Center in Sunnyvale, California, that is going to be controlling the Galileo deep space probe, controlling the rocket engine that sends that controversial probe that's going to be launched by Atlantis into space. And that lab may have sustained some damage in California, so because of that, there may be a delay in the Atlantis launch. And we'll get more information for you on that a bit later. Let's go to KRON. We'll rejoin the coverage of KRON in San Francisco. They have the mayor with them now.
On some people who were either in a car or on the street.
Mr. Mayor, you've just about completed your tour of the city now, looking at the major damage areas. What have we seen? What are we talking about in dollar terms and in terms of rebuilding?
Well, it's very clear that we've got a devastating impact here in the Marina District, which is the one I've spent most of my time in. Prior to here, I was at the command headquarters directing various city services as we needed them around the city. The city is in decent shape, and I say that hesitantly because I haven't seen it all except from the air and gotten reports from different parts of the city, except for the Marina. Here we've had a devastating major impact that will be in the millions and millions of dollars. There's no question about that. We'll have to wait till daylight to begin to get a specific number, but we've got some major proportions here in terms of damage.
In terms of the city's overall reaction, when we talk about fire reaction, police reaction, we know there were water problems down here in the Marina, but overall, do you have an assessment at this point?
Well, my assessment at this point is that the city has responded very well. The police have handled the major traffic jams, kept down some very minor sporadic vandalism in other parts of the city. We haven't had any reported here. We've got our full shift on duty. We've had over 150 officers come back on duty. We've had 300 firefighters show up in addition to our regular complement of firefighters who have manned all of our firefighting stations. Our ambulance services have done a tremendous job. We got a lot of help from our neighbors to the south in San Mateo County as well as from Marin. Our hospitals are operational. The water lines are all working except in this area. Power is slowly being turned on in the southern part of the city, and we hope within another hour we'll have half the city with electricity. So the city has responded and handled it well. Most of all, the San Franciscans have responded by caring for one another, looking out for one another, by helping here with firefighting equipment, as well as around the city, helping people who were either hurt, walking wounded, or somehow needed some help.
Even in traffic situations, we saw a lot of cooperation on major intersections. Where does the city go from here, Mr. Mayor? What do we do next as we wake up tomorrow morning and try to assess all of this?
Well, we've got our city building inspectors, our city engineers, and all vital personnel on duty throughout the night. They're looking at buildings to make sure that they are safe for people as best we can throughout the night. We'll obviously be doing it tomorrow and the next day so that we can assure people of schools, of City Hall, of downtown buildings like hospitals and things like that to make sure that they can be used. We're telling people not to go to work in the morning until they check with their place of employment to make sure it's safe for them to come. The schools have been closed for tomorrow by order of Superintendent Cortinas, and we're asking people to stay calm and be as helpful as they've been by taking care of one another. We're getting through this. The city is being restored to good working order, except for this part of the city where we're going to have to give them a lot of extra help. I've declared a local state of emergency to make us eligible for whatever federal state assistance is available for people, and obviously we're going to need a lot of it because this is going to cost the city and the individual homeowners and businesses a lot of money.
The best assessment we can get right now from the man who runs the city. This was Mayor Art Agnos. Back to you in the studio.
Wilson, may we ask another question? I'm wondering if there are people who are unaccounted for, perhaps trapped in elevators without the power working. Is there any collection of missing persons reports?
Mr. Mayor, have you heard any reports of missing people in the city of San Francisco, people who are unaccounted for at this point?
Well, I was over at the Red Cross shelter a few moments ago prior to coming here to look at the damage, and there's some uncertainty about people that are in the building, but we don't have all of the names recorded because we've been getting people in there as fast as we can from those who were evacuated here as well as those who lost their homes from the fire, and we don't have them all recorded yet. So people are asking, and we don't have all the answers yet, but each hour we're getting on top of it, and we're getting those answers.
So that still apparently is an unknown. Any more questions while we have
just
the mayor
a quick
here?
question,
Certainly.
Wilson. I'd like to know from the mayor what he and Mayor McHenry have discussed, and if Mayor McHenry is going to send him any police assistance.
Have you heard any talk about sending police assistance, I guess, from the city of San Jose? Have you talked to Tom McHenry?
Yes, I have. I've talked to Mayor Tom McHenry, who was a good neighbor by calling me and saying, whatever you need, we're in pretty good shape. They didn't get damaged very badly, and offered whatever they might need, we might need. And we're handling this. what we really did need and got from San Mateo as well as from Marin was ambulance services to get people to hospitals. We've done that, but our firefighters have responded magnificently. Our police, our medical personnel, our Department of Public Works, they're on the job tonight, right now as we speak, and have been since our disaster plan kicked into action at our command post. And so we're in charge of the city. It's under control, and we're just asking people to cooperate just as they have been and respond like they have been by taking care of one another, making sure their gas is turned off, and not going out in the streets until daylight, and we got some more information for them.
We thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We'll go back to you, Bob and Suzanne.
Thank you, Wilson. Mayor
two gentlemen that certainly have their hands full tonight.
Absolutely. For those of you who are just joining us, we do have a map to show you of where the epicenter is located, and that is in Santa Cruz. We understand, although this has not been pinpointed yet, near the Lexington Reservoir, up there in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So it's about 50 miles southeast of San Francisco.